Okay, thank you, Leon, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Andrea. I'm an instructional designer from Tele, and today I'm very happy to share with you my experience with the project Everyday Computing. My sharing will cover two parts. First half being a brief overview of the project, what it entails and how it came about. And the second part is my experience from applying for the award. Now, as some of you might know, this was my second time applying for Reimagine award, and the first time with the same project, I actually failed to make the shortlist. So comparing this failure and success experience, I hope to draw out some of the tips that you might find helpful in crafting your own application. I have very limited time, so let's dive right into it. So, Everyday Computing is a board game that we developed for students to learn computational thinking. And the board game itself is based on a common core course we teach here at Hong Kong U. I co-teach and instructional design this course with Professor Ricky Kwok and supported by a team of really excellent tutors and TAs here in the team. So for the details of the game itself, I would like to use the most effective way by inviting my colleagues to share what the game is and how it was developed.
CCSD 903 is one of the general education courses in our university, and my design for the course is about computing algorithms.
In our course, we introduced several important algorithm paradigms to students. We incorporate these algorithms as game elements.
We use the university lab as a story and integrated the algorithm into the game process.
So I hope students would get away with a few useful computing algorithms without actually learning how to do programming.
Computational thinking is a way that you can think systematically and in a more efficient way.
It's a board game designed to help students learn the algorithms.
To help students connect the knowledge they have learned from the course to their everyday life, so they can really observe the process of applying algorithm in solving specific problems.
The graphic design of the board and also the card are related to the algorithm. For example, this one is recursion, graph, and also cryptography. Before, they are just abstract concepts, but now with the board game, students will have a very detailed feeling about what the algorithm is and how they can be implemented.
I'm studying computer engineering.
I'm a third-year computer science student.
Studying accounting and finance.
I'm studying Chinese and bilingual studies.
I'm now studying quantitative finance.
I study psychology.
I study computer science.
Design of the algorithm power board had already illustrated the phenomenon or the theory of each algorithm.
From the board game, I remember Fibonacci numbers. It can be solved with recursion algorithm.
I'm so lucky to get all the recursion cards, but I think that approaching the end is preferably what makes the most benefit.
Matching descriptions to algorithms before and after the board game. And I could also feel that, after the board game, I knew all the answers, but before that, maybe I was not so sure about 3 or 4 of them.
You look at the board and look at your place in the board at that point in time, and then you choose what option will give you the best outcome, because you don't know what will happen after a few rounds. You just consider that round, which is basically what real algorithm is.
Learning is about getting interest in some subject matters
so they can learn more by themselves.
Learning is the process of making connections between the known and the unknown.
The process of experiencing something, and you can get something from the experience.
Learning by implementing, learning how to learn.
Learning is a purposeful social activity, and I think our game makes this process more fun.
Okay, so I hope this short video gives you a brief idea of what the game is, so I won't dwell on any more details of the game design, but instead I want to take you behind the scene to look at how the game was developed. So within the team, we had this small task force of 5 people comprised with the course instructor and coordinator, Professor Ricky Kwok, and also the course teaching assistant, Xiang Yu, who you just met in the video, 2 board game experts who are also the graphic designer, and also our other colleague here at Telly, and lastly myself, the instructional designer. And this task force of 5 people, we would meet bi-weekly to discuss on the progress and provide feedback to the development. I would like to explain the process with the model of design thinking. So we went through 3 stages with the design, from idea to prototype and to iterate. If you're unfamiliar with this model, don't worry, I'll unpack them with the detailed development design, steps. So in the idea process, we wanted to focus on the possibilities. When we had this idea of connecting board game with a course, we invited these colleagues who are really experts in board game, and we played several games that we think maybe they recommended that could be relevant to the course or to a learning activity. And among these references, we select one of them which we think the content, the design, and the mechanism would be most suitable for a learning game. I think this is the most critical stage for the instructor, the content expert, the instructional designer, and also the game experts to synchronize with each other on where we want to go with this project and what are the key considerations we want to focus on in the design. And based on that, we identified this game that we wanted to not copy from, but really to adapt the mechanism from. And using that, we propose a game outline, including what kind of content knowledge we want to include and what kind of game mechanism we want. And using that, we designed the first prototype. The first prototype was really rough. It was just printed paper with some drawings. And as you can see, the tokens, we actually took them from other board games just so that we can illustrate what concept, what kind of flow we want. And then setting the whole task force into the context of the gameplay so we can provide meaningful feedback to the designer. And from there, we went through several iterations of the same process, test play, revision, until we were finally happy with the final game. This process started from mid-April in 2018 and ended by about mid-August because we also needed to allow time to do the artwork design, the printing, and eventually brought it into the classroom in October 2018. So eventually we were happy with the design, not because it was perfect, but because through this iteration, we were able to resolve all of the learning outcomes we wanted to achieve and also the fun element of it. So that's about the game, and I'm happy to share more details if you are interested. But next I want to share, like I mentioned, the failure to success experience of applying for an educational award, or in another case, you're building your teacher portfolio or applying for a grant for supporting your initiative. As you can see from the timeline, the time for applying for the award is about September. So the first year when I applied, I was really just finishing the design of the game. I was all over the moon. I was going all about how great it is and how much details we incorporated. So when I read the proposal again, I wouldn't even be interested because I didn't know where I was getting with it. So in the second year, luckily, I had the chance to sit down and really look at what problem this initiative was solving. So I think that's the most important thing when you're crafting an application, is to have a very clear problem statement. Just like building a research proposal, you want to have a research problem stated out very clearly, and hopefully it can be something that resonates with the judges, with the audience. It's a agreed upon problem. So in my application, I focus on this problem that we have been teaching computational thinking with teaching students coding or programming. But that doesn't necessarily achieve the goal, because that's just like teaching philosophy by saying, go live your life and you'll figure it out. It just doesn't work. So we wanted to propose a solution that could somehow bridge this gap between learning coding, the hardcore coding and computing, with developing these thinking skills. So I think that's also the point that got across with the judge and got interested in our project. And the next thing is also because of the time constraint. In the first year, I wasn't able to collect any students' feedback, but in the second year, I was able to add in the students' endorsement. And here we ask students very specific questions, that is how does the board game help you understand the algorithm that you have already learned, or how does the board game help you apply the algorithms? So the students' response actually help us to support the problem statement we set forward. We wanted to develop computational thinking, and the students' description also said they were able to articulate these, the abstract level kind of element of the algorithm instead of just looking at them as maths. And lastly, the reason I showed a video in the beginning is that actually most of the projects we saw at the conference were using videos plus photos and all kinds of multimedia to present their case. So I think if you're familiar with the term, a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is probably worth 1,000 pictures. You really want to bring the audience or the judges to the dynamics of the classroom or wherever you're applying your the context where you're applying your project so that they get the immersive feeling of what it feels like to be part of this project. So I'm sure other colleagues will have more tips to share, but that's just my very high-level sort of reflection based on my failure to success experience. And finally, summarizing that, I would just like to share final 3 tips on either building your own project or applying for a award or a grant like this. First of all, it's definitely always collect. Now, when I start building the proposal, I realized how many details and how many moments that were really exciting, but I actually missed because I didn't collect those moments. Now, this doesn't have to be very carefully planned. Just always have your cell phone, take a picture, take a short video of what you think is interesting that's happening in the classroom, and those will become very helpful when you start building your and crafting your proposal. And the next thing is once you have this huge collection, you can take some time and reflect on what are the themes, what are the problems emerging from this collection, and what are the highlights that you want to draw from this collection. And lastly is something that I think is extremely important when it comes to going to conferences like this, is never forget to connect. Now here I'm using really my favorite photo from the conference last year. Here is Colin from Johannesburg. He's running a program for refugee kids in South Africa. And you saw my presentation, he was really interested in the game. So at the end of the conference, I gave him a set of the game. Hopefully he can find ways to implement it in his own program. And we're still, and from our side, we're happy to help them adapt it, and so that we can have a bigger impact with something we develop here in Hong Kong. So I think that's something all educators would want, is to create something that can impact hopefully more people, and that's the theme of our talk today, is to scaling up your educational initiative. And with that, I want to end my part. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions if you have.